Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to tackle forgiveness, but not in the way you might think. We're going to look at it less like some fuzzy emotion and more like a hard-coded system mechanic, like a full top-to-bottom reboot for your entire spiritual operating system.
Oh man, we've all been there, right? You're just stuck. Your own peace, your own freedom, is basically being held hostage by someone else's refusal to say two simple words. It feels like a total system deadlock. But what if the real problem isn't them? What if the problem is the very software we're using to process the whole thing?
Okay, so let's get right into it. You've probably heard this metaphor before. Holding a grudge is like running old software on new hardware. And, it's a decent start, but honestly, it's fundamentally flawed. Why? Because it treats you like a computer. The deeper reality is that your spirit isn't a machine at all. It's a living, breathing spiritual conductor. Now this is where it gets really interesting. This idea is called systemic spiritual conductivity. It comes from a framework called True Spiritual Sciences, and it proposes that our spirit isn't made of code. It's designed to be a vessel that conducts a kind of high-pressure spiritual substance. The source material calls it pneuma, or the breath of life. So forget bits and bytes. We're talking about flow. We're talking about pressure.
And that's the absolute key right there. When we're holding on to unforgiveness, it's not some simple software bug that we can just patch or ignore. No, it's a real physical and spiritual blockage. Think of it like a clogged artery. It literally stops the flow of life, and what happens then? Well, it leads to spiritual decay and death. This is way more serious than just a temporary glitch.
So the real question is, how do you fix a blockage like that? You don't just reboot a buggy program. You need a completely new operating system, one that's built for living science, not just simple mechanical fixes. And that new OS is called the TSPW framework. It stands for True Spiritual Sciences Pneumatology Wellness. And the whole model is built on the idea that spiritual laws are just as absolute as physical laws, like gravity or thermodynamics. And the engine driving this whole thing? It's that pneuma we talked about, the spirit that pushes us toward total wellness.
Okay, now inside the system, there are two opposing realities that are constantly at war within us. On one side, you've got FCR, the fractured creation rendering. Just think of this as your old default programming. It's a state of pure reaction, just driven by trauma and simple cause and effect. But then, on the other side, there's NCR, the new creation rendering. This is your true spiritual hardware. This is a state of dominion, of responsibility, that comes straight from the Father.
You know that feeling, that internal tug of war when you know you should forgive, but you just can't? Well, this framework has a name for that: systemic lag. It's the friction you feel when your spirit is already operating in that high-speed new creation mode, but your mind and emotions keep digging up these old, corrupted files from the fractured creation archives of pain. It's a classic rendering conflict. And this table just lays out the paradigm shift perfectly. That old software we keep talking about? It's not just code, it's FCR, frequency residue, actual trauma loops that are vibrating in your system. And deleting a virus? That becomes an act of active dominion called remitting sin. A system reboot? Forget that. This is something called aphiemi, a powerful centrifugal release that literally spins the blockage right out of you.
So now that we've got this new language, let's look at how it reframes the fundamental choice we all have to make when we get hurt. Because it really is like a double-edged sword. Are we going to operate by transaction, or are we going to operate in dominion?
And here are the two sides of that sword. First, you've got the apology trap. This is classic FCR thinking. I'll forgive you, but only after you say you're sorry. And what's the problem with that? You've just handed the keys to your own jail cell to the person who hurt you. But on the other side, you have unilateral release. This is the NCR approach. You declare, I'm releasing this debt, not because you deserve it, but because the Father already paid for it. And just like that, you take back your dominion. Now here's a mind-bending idea. Both of these states, holding that bitter grudge and actively choosing to forgive, are actually high-frequency, high-energy states. We tend to think peace is passive or low energy, but that's just not true. The difference here isn't about the intensity of the energy, it's about the nature of that energy.
And this slide just nails that distinction. The high frequency of unforgiveness, it's like a fever. It's high-voltage toxicity, a systemic infection of strife and wrath that is literally burning your own vessel down from the inside out. But the high frequency of NCR forgiveness, that's like a furnace. It's high-powered, cleansing heat that comes from love.
It doesn't burn the vessel, it purifies the entire atmosphere around you. So, what happens when we choose the fever? What's the real tangible cost of staying in that transactional FCR model, just waiting and waiting for an apology? Well, it's kind of like having your entire life savings locked away in a blocked account you can't access.
This quote from the source material just says it all, doesn't it? Unforgiveness isn't just a bad mood, it's a chronological anchor. It literally freezes your potential, and get this, it gives negativity a legal right, a foothold to mess with your future progress.
So let's just break down those costs. These aren't punishments being handed down from somewhere else. They are limits we put on ourselves. You end up restricting your own authority. You blind your own spiritual eyes to new opportunities. You literally cut off your own supply line of provision and revelation. And worst of all, you lock yourself into this state of internal captivity, where you are forced to watch that same painful movie on an endless loop. But there is a way out. And the solution is to completely reframe this. We have to stop seeing forgiveness as some emotion we have to muster up and start seeing it for what it is, an authoritative tool we are meant to use. It's a governmental key. And this right here is probably the single most important point of this whole explainer. Forgiveness is not about feeling some kind of emotional release. It's about making a decision. It is a jurisdictional act, a legal governmental choice that you make to reopen your own access to the flow of divine opportunity that has been yours all along. The tool you use to do this is called the silver key. See, in the spiritual framework, silver is the symbol for redemption. The moment you become a believer, you are handed this key. Forgiveness, then, is simply the act of choosing to put that key in the lock and turn it. The crazy thing is, so many of us are walking around with this key in our pocket, standing outside a locked door to our own inheritance, and we just refuse to use it.
So how do you actually turn the key? Well, it's a protocol, not an emotional roller coaster. Step 1, acknowledge the debt is real. Your pain is totally valid. Step 2, stop looking horizontally at the person who hurt you, expecting them to pay up. Instead, look vertically to the Father. Step 3, make a firm governmental decision, like a judge slamming a gavel, to release that debt because a higher authority has already settled the account. And finally, Step 4, exercise your dominion, remit the sin, and cleanse the atmosphere.
And when you finally turn that key, you don't just get some vague sense of peace. Oh no. You unlock specific, tangible dimensions of treasure that were totally inaccessible to you before.
The sources call these the treasures of the Magi. Gold. That represents kingship and provision. The financial flow you need for your life's assignment starts moving again. Frankincense. That represents restored intimacy, a clear connection to the divine. Your prayers get through. And myrrh. That represents the death of that old, wounded self, which makes room for resurrection, life, and real, authentic power. I mean, these are the stakes we're talking about.
Which really just leaves us with one final question to sit with. What if forgiveness was never really about your feelings or about their apology or about letting them off the hook? What if it's always been about you? About having the courage to take back the key that you already hold, to unlock your own future and to finally step into the full, incredible inheritance that's been waiting for you this whole time?